In Florida, the state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6-week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks.
Donald Trump being inconsistent. Imagine that. That's what Donald Trump said earlier this week when NBC's Dasha Burns asked how he'll vote on the ballot measure seeking to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution of Florida, where Trump resides. He's since, clarified, changed his opinion, whatever. He says he will actually vote no on Florida's abortion ballot measure. Okay. Getting him out of the way for a second. Joining me now to discuss this, one of the biggest issues on the ballot this year, abortion rights, Kathy Spiller, co-founder and executive director of Feminist Majority Foundation. She's also the executive director of Ms. Magazine. And Minnie Timuraju is the president and CEO of the group Reproductive Freedom for All. Welcome to both of you. I'm sorry to kick off your segment with a clip by Donald Trump. His inconsistency is uninteresting news, generally speaking. But, Minnie, it does speak to something important, that it's not that inconsistent. In other words, what Donald Trump and this Project 2025 want to do, there's no mystery in this. There is just no mystery. You can call it giving it back to the states. You can call it a ban on abortion. You can call it whatever you want. Women will not control their reproductive rights and their bodies under a Republican administration after November, if that happens.
I mean, women in 22 states already aren't controlling their reproductive freedom because of Donald Trump and his actions. Look, I mean, we've seen this week remarkable newsmaking by Trump on abortion and reproductive freedom. A few days ago, he also rolled out an IVF policy that was, quite frankly, ridiculous. He has very high level of awareness of how unpopular his record is, his position is, and his party is with voters overall. And look, at the end of the day, we have the receipts. You know, J.D. Vance in the Senate voted against an IVF bill. There have been IVF legislation moving through the Senate that Republicans have blocked over and over again. And as you pointed out, you know, Project 2025, but also the GOP platform have language that would essentially say embryos are people. So that's the root underlying issue for all of this. So look, Trump knows it's unpopular. He's going to say anything he can to distract from his record and get voters confused. But as you said, if you're paying attention, it's very, very clear where Trump and Vance are and how much worse it could get. They could move the Comstock Act and enforce it with or without Congress and essentially have a national abortion ban. They could restrict mifepristone even further and essentially have a national abortion ban. So I think voters are smart. They're paying attention, but it's our job to make sure they're very, very clear on the contrast.
People, more abortions are performed using mifepristone and medication abortion than anything else. If the Comstock Act is used, which would classify this as the same way as pornography, you couldn't mail mifepristone to people in the country. So this is important to people in Michigan and in California and New York. Kathy, what do you think? Do you think that part of what's driving the unpopularity of these abortion bans is a dawning realization among the population that abortion is actually health care? That used to be a radical thing to say. People used to call that controversial. But now we see women telling stories about nearly dying because they are denied miscarriage management, and that's just a statement of fact. I mean, they're not getting their health care.
You exactly put your finger on the issue. We are now seeing in the states that ban abortion or highly restrict abortion, these horrible stories, near death. And in some cases, women have died because they have been denied simple abortion care under these bans when they presented in emergency rooms and were bleeding out. And that's what, I mean, this strikes a chord with people, women and men. Women see themselves, their daughters, their sisters. Men see their daughters or their wives at risk. So the longer these bans are in place, the more these stories come out, the firmer American people are about where they are on this issue. And there's no question. I mean, the vast majority of people in this country, Democrats, independents, and Republicans, are against government interference with the access to abortion and reproductive health care services. 74% say they're opposed to the government interfering. line. And that's what these bans do. And the ballot measures that will be appearing on the November ballot are the way to get rid of these bans. You know, the reason they're appearing on these states is because these state constitutions allow for citizen initiatives to place these measures before the voters. Many states do not allow such measures to come before the voters initiated by the citizens. And so some states are just stuck until we get policies at the federal level that will get rid of these bans and ensure that women, no matter what zip code they live in, can have access to life-saving care and to health care, including abortion.
Minnie, let's talk about some of these referenda, and I want to talk specifically about Nebraska. I'm going to be watching that very closely to the point that Eddie Glaude and I were talking about earlier. Every vote matters, and Nebraska is going to be proof of that on election night. The Secretary of State there says this is the first time that two competing proposals that would not work together have made it onto the ballot on the same time. So I want to talk about that. If they both get passed, get more than the simple majority, the one that gets the most votes will go into force, which means every vote will absolutely count in Nebraska. Have you seen this approach before?
I have not yet. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but we haven't seen this in recent times. So I'll say Nebraska is also interesting because of the way the electoral votes are split by congressional district. So there's going to be a lot of activity in Nebraska that folks may not have been anticipating. There's a competitive congressional race. It's relevant to get to 270 for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. So I think there's going to be a lot of investment and interest in Nebraska. It's going to be really, really important to cut through the disinformation on the anti-abortion side about these ballot measures. They're pretty confusing side by side. And so it's going to be really important that voters are being communicated to very, very clearly about the stakes. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I think we're going to see a lot more attention on Nebraska.
Kathy, what are you expecting to happen here? What we have generally seen with those first 6 referenda is that they drive votes. We've seen polling that indicates that even if abortion is your second or third biggest concern, it may be the one that gets you to the polls. So tell me what you anticipate.
Well, there's no question that the abortion issue gets people to the polls, especially women and especially young women. We've seen that in referendum after referendum, the results. Women come out in droves, especially young women, and they vote overwhelmingly to support abortion rights. They also condition their vote for candidates on where the candidate is on abortion rights. And so as long as the candidates are using abortion and reproductive rights in their campaign ads and their materials and are very clear where they stand, they are going to get a huge vote, not only by Democrats, but by independents, especially independent women and Republican women. Look, let's face it, Republican women are crossing the line to vote for candidates that will ensure access to abortion. It's the reason we're winning these referendums with such large margins. That's not just Democrats. That is Democrats, independents, and especially Republican women. And as many was pointing out, the only way that these anti-abortion measures can win is if the Republican secretaries of state, attorneys general play dirty tricks and they change the language that will appear on the ballot to confuse voters, or they try and block the measure from even getting to the ballot, which we've seen in Arkansas, for example. But the good news is that voters are not stupid, especially women voters. They can see through. They know what they want, and they're going to go to the polls and pass these ballot measures to ensure constitutional rights for women.
Thank you to both of you. Kathy Spiller, co-founder and executive director of Feminist Majority Foundation, as well as the executive director of Ms. Magazine, and Minnie Timuraju, president and CEO of Reproductive Freedom for All. We'll be right back.